Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Black Girl Gamers Online Summit. Welcome to the last panel of the day. I know. I hope you've had an amazing time, and we are going to end this with some authentic, real conversations about the industry. Something that I know a lot of us wanted to talk about and experience, and during the time we could not. So, this is going to be a pivotal panel. In this panel, we're going to use Gamergate as the backdrop, and we'll discuss the realities of gaming culture, the intersections with gaming community, and how people can be accountable allies. I'll be joined by Ash Parish, staff writer at The Verge, who writes with a focus on covering marginalized gamers and their communities, and Kim Belair, CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., a narrative consultancy based in Canada. Kim has worked as a writer, narrative designer, and consultant on projects such as Sable, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2, and many more. So let's meet our panelists. Hi, hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. This is obviously a very topical and sensitive subject. So first of all, I just want to thank you both for being here and for being willing to share your experiences. I know we've all, myself included, been targeted by the phenomenon that is Gamergate. And I firstly want to start off with thanking you for your bravery to be here and speak, but also now leading into the panel, tell me briefly about your experiences during the Gamergate phenomenon. We'll start with you, Ash, and just give me a brief synopsis of what you experienced.
So, I am a video game journalist, and if you know nothing about Gamergate, one of their main hated enemies more than anything is a video game journalist who is not afraid to speak truth to power. And my experience with that whole chicanery is that they popped up. I went and embedded in their Discord and listened to the kinds of things that they were saying and why they were saying those things. Wrote a piece about how this second Gamergate is a bit smaller and sadder than what it was 10 years ago. And, whenever you write about those kinds of things, it really kicks a hornet's nest over. And so you get all these kinds of negative attention on your social media, in your email, those kinds of things. I've gotten death threats to my voicemail that I've had to, call the FBI about. And that's just what happens when you try to do your job as a journalist and write about these things that are happening in a truthful and authentic kind of way. And sometimes people don't like that.
Yeah, and Kim, I know obviously with the company and the good work that you've done, your organization and yourself were huge targets in this phenomenon. Tell us about your experience as well.
Yeah, I would say I think of us almost in as like patient zero of this wave of Gamergate, in that I think when I think of it as where it started, it was kind of the week that we had announced that we were on both Alan Wake 2 and Spider-Man 2, which are two, I think, popular games among the game community and players in general. And immediately, I think the targeting began with this kind of like, we found this secret, sinister website from Sweet Baby Inc. Meanwhile, we're on Twitter like, I was so excited to let people know that we worked on these two really great games. And the assumption was essentially made that our work on that had not been story or narrative or character related. It had been to make a Black character exist in Alan Wake 2, and I think to put pride flags in Spider-Man 2. And that was kind of like the assumption that we had wokeified the video games. And then that led to, as a company, we worked on over 80 games together. So there was plenty of fodder for people to start going, oh, is this the reason that all of these games are now woke, that they have people of color in them, or queer people, or any marginalized identities at all? Or even sometimes that, they perceive like, oh, this woman's design is not quite as it used to be, and I think it used to be hotter. So there's a lot of stuff that's been put on us, both things that we did work on, things that we didn't, and then we kind of just became shorthand for the wokeification, quote unquote, of gaming.
Yeah, I think we all saw it, and with Sweet Baby becoming essentially, they used your company and yourself as a synonym for what they describe as wokeifying gaming, really. And similar to your experiences, we experienced death threats for the team. The team were worried about putting on this summit, hence why we've held it in this platform in general, because there was a lot of relentless harassment, death threats, emails, comments to a small team. And one of the things that actually also affected us as well, and I know affected you both, is libel and slander,
Yes.
like things that were not actually true but being spread around companies and similar to us. So there's a blurred line between the content creators and journalists. Ashley, how can gamers discern the difference when it comes to consuming mis or disinformation around people and companies when it comes to Gamergate? How can people discern the two?
So what you want to do is you always want to consider your source. You can get your opinions, you can get your hot takes, you can get your video game reviews from wherever you want, I don't care. But when you are consuming news, like what is happening in the gaming world, consider your source and always consider reliable sources. Your reliable sources are going to be like your big tentpole legacy media kind of places. I work for The Verge, which is a vertical of Vox Media. There's Polygon, there's IGN, there's GameSpot, there's all these different legacy video game websites that have been around for a very long time that have a vested interest in making sure that the things that they share with you, the things that they write, are up to journalistic standards. There are other like smaller hobbyist sites that you may want to, depending on if you know the author or are familiar with their work, that you can continue to consume their work, but just make sure that anytime you're reading something that's like news based, like actual factual information, that you are consuming them from reliable sources.
And then we hear all of this, like, so along with the slander and the libel, we obviously got a lot of death threats and slurs in our inboxes, and not even just for us, for our team. I know, Kim, your experiences and your team went through a lot, but
We've been through some stuff.
Yeah, you've been through some things, so please talk on that, and also please talk on what is this idea of wokeifying gaming really? Like, what is that when people talk about that?
I mean, I think it's part of it's the greater movement, right, towards a lot of like very far right thinking and a lot of very regressive material that's kind of just being pushed out across a lot of different, or at least like in a lot of the audiences of a lot of different industries are currently kind of talking about that. And obviously the political landscape is kind of led to a lot of this. But I think for a lot of people, it really comes down to they see a change that they themselves did not expect. They see a change that they can't fathom that their beloved companies or their beloved teams would ever make themselves. And so they kind of assume that anyone who comes in who looks like myself or other members of my team are the interlopers, right? Like our job can only be tied to our identity. It's speaking of misinformation, I think the biggest thing for us during this campaign is that I would say that any kind of sensitivity work or consulting work in cultural consultation probably represents about 15% of our work, where the vast majority of it is actually writing, narrative design, joining writing teams, helping support writing teams, sometimes being the entire writing team for a project or helping with mission design. But the part that really gets everyone assuming that we can't possibly do that other work because all we are is quote unquote DEI, and we became labeled as this DEI company when the facts of the way that we work are that someone calls in and says, hey, we're making something, we've made a bunch of choices, we'd love you to either help write, help look at them, help talk to us. And even sometimes our cultural consultation is as specific as it's job consultation. It's we had to hire a meteorologist at one point to do a consult on a project. And I think that idea of authenticity for people, if you say like, oh, we hired a lawyer because we have to write about lawyers, no one would ever bat an eye. But they can't imagine that you'd want to bring in someone from a specific background or country or experience to talk about this. And I think there's also this idea that if a game company is reaching out to external people, that's because they're missing something or they can't handle something, and not because in the very real world of creation across many different media, people talk to each other. People have writers' rooms. Directors and writers of huge movies go to each other's houses and talk and do punch-ups to each other's scripts, and that's kind of how creativity works. But this is what it's become.
Yeah, it's very sad to see people doing a lot of the most progressive work become a lot of the most harassment in this the phenomenon that was Gamergate, and it was based on a lot of hypocrisy as well, because we saw the hypocrisy of a lot of gamers saying that they and Ash, I'm sure you mentioned this before, saying that they want to make games, but then when marginalized people or people who, if the studios then want to include marginalized people, it's they're forced to do so.
Yeah, I
And
was
there's this
actually gonna.
phenomenon of, yeah, no,
No,
feel free to talk on that.
yeah, no, I was actually going to bring that up because it's interesting that a lot of these Gamergate arguments is that they want developer autonomy. Like the developer should be able to do whatever it is that they want, and they shouldn't have to kowtow to some kind of ESG corporate overlord that controls their purse strings. When the reality is, with the way that video game development works and with the way video game consultancy works, they have already made those choices. These are the things that you see, the things that they hate, the things that they decry as woke are the choices that they have already made, and they want to improve them, which is why they bring in people like Kim to help make sure that the things that they have already chosen for their games are as best and as authentic as like not insensitive or relying on stereotypes as they can be, so they can resonate the way that these developers have want them to resonate. So it is very much a very hypocrisy. We're not really paying attention. We don't really care about any of that. Like, it's not about developer autonomy. They don't care about that. They say they do, but they don't. What it really is that they are upset that they're, not seeing the kinds of things that they think they should be seeing, and it makes them mad, and they want to lash out at something, and they have found convenient scapegoats in marginalized people and people of color.
And is it so taking on what you've said, because we also consulted here Black Girl Gamers for a large studio and for other smaller studios as well, and there's that idea that again we're changing the game, and I think it's just because we've got the word black in our name, people are just they have to be aggressive, and it's definitely not the case. But when it comes to Gamergate, we had the first one in 2014. And then 10 years later, we're having the same exact phenomenon, the same behavior perpetuated against marginalized people. And specifically, this wave was about consultation. It was very interesting to see a lack of statement. We've seen obviously some studios make recent statements on consultation recently and actually stand by their consultants, which is great. But for the most part, obviously, Kim, you said you make work on like 70, 80 titles, and we've worked on at least a good number. There's been this, underlying kind of silence or just ignoring of the Gamergate situation. And then what does the industry need to do to help curb these negative moments in the future? I'll start with Kim.
I would say that at a certain point, it's a macro level community management, right? It's learning how to, I think, express these kinds of things, not only when we have these spikes of hate campaigns, but also in general. I think that there are some studios that do a much better job of it than others, I would say. But what I think strikes me all the time is that I don't think there's as much at risk in speaking out as a lot of people are afraid of, right? And I think that there's a lot of, the sense of it'll blow over. And in a way it does, right? Everything ends, everything kind of ebbs and flows. But at the same time, I think that it's completely fine to do it when Gamergate is not a flame, right? It's fine to kind of speak your truth to your values and kind of like really stand by them at other times. And I think that that's something that would help prevent it, and to kind of be more, and I think also to be more open and honest just about the way that people work with consultants. Because I do think that there's often this sense, even on the company side, that, well, we want to say like, this is our game. We don't necessarily want to look at this, or we don't want to always show how the sausage is made. And we also don't want anyone to, put all the attention on someone else outside the team. And I fully get that. You don't want to always reveal every single part of the game, I think, team. But for a group like us, I think it's always helpful to be able to be clear. And a lot of places have allowed us to speak on it, to be able to say, well, this is exactly what we did. But there's always those times when you kind of wish you could just have a little more transparency in general, because I think that would, at least to some people, because obviously there's a huge contingent of this movement who has no care for the truth, but I think it would still be very helpful to have a source of truth out there to say, well, here's what we did on this project, here's how we're going to talk about it, and here's why we really enjoyed working on it, or here's what value it brought.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's interesting navigating a scenario like that when, for the most part, you've literally done nothing, and it's just popped out of nowhere, and you now have to
Yes.
deal with something that the industry can pass off as, oh, it will pass, but for people like us, Black women and marginalized people in the industry, this is not something that just passes. This is something we have to live through. This is something we have to experience. With Ash, someone impersonated Ash to us as a person, and that was completely randomly, because we didn't even meet in person until we went and saw each other at Ubi Forward later on during the year. So it's such an interesting dynamic, that such a huge moment that can really affect, but also just hinder and be annoying to people who are making progress in the industry, can go so overlooked and just be brushed under the carpet by the industry.
I think annoying is a very good word for it, because largely it doesn't materially affect our work, right? The vast majority of these companies already know what's going on, and they still hire us. They know what we actually do, and it doesn't necessarily change our baseline survival, but it does change the comfort level with which we can exist in online spaces. And so it ends up being this kind of like very challenging, but still like it's just it's a distraction.
Yeah.
It feels very much like it's a time wasting thing. It's a demoralizing thing, but it has this weird effect of, it doesn't affect your day to day, but it's like noise outside. A friend of mine and a studio who had been targeted in the past referred to it as kind of like, it's as though you still, like, you're living at your house and these people have kind of camped out on your lawn, where they're kind of like, hey, we want to yell at you, we want to say bad things about you, but ultimately you just have to work. But there's just going to be people kind of shouting, and it makes it harder, but it doesn't stop it from happening.
Go ahead.
And I will say, as loud and as demoralizing and as, messed up as this whole thing is, this is actually a really, 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 really small part of gaming as a whole.
Yes.
It's a very terminally online problem. If you are not terminally online and you are a gamer, if you're even your average gamer, your most average gamer, which is probably like a 13-year-old boy or girl who plays Roblox, they have no idea this is going on. Even the grown adults who pay money, who buy their like one game a year, they have no idea what's going on. Even if they are online, this is just something that does not affect the regular rank and file gamer. So I don't want people to think that this is like a common problem, or this is a big problem, or like all these people like have really this much hate. It's just not that big of a problem at all. It gets amplified because it's a really small population and they have extremely loud voices, but your average gamer does not know about this and they do not give a shit about it. So at least at the end of the day, that's what you can take away and feel better about it, despite the fact that we are all mired in this mess that we have to interact with on a daily basis or whatever. Like, it's really, outside of that, nah, this is not a thing. That doesn't even register.
That has been a tremendous comfort for me, I think, in the months when it was especially loud. I remember I went to GDC and I went to a couple other events, and I kind of had that expectation of or if someone I meet somewhere goes, oh, where do you work, and I have to say Sweet Baby Inc., I had that expectation of like
they're wince.
You're going, like, is this going to be okay? Or my Uber driver asks and stuff. And it's been anyone who has heard of us has been like, yeah, I'm sorry you had to deal with that, which has been lovely. And then a lot of other folks, both in the player community and in the dev community, have just been like, oh, I had no idea. I'm sorry that happened. But every time I get I have no idea, I'm like, yeah. That feels kind of nice.
It is good. I did, that was my next question, in terms of spinning it to a positive note. One, it also shows that the work that we do needs to happen. The writing on the marginalized communities in gaming needs to happen. The consultation for games needs to happen, because the small community, though they are small, they are loud, and we do need to have our contrasting narratives out there. But in the next kind of 10 years, well, we hopefully won't have another Gamergate in 2034, but what are the things that you think the industry could be doing to foster a better environment in the next 10 years to support companies like yourself and journalists like yourself, Ash?
The way that companies can support journalists, give us money, It's really hard because the way that the media landscape works is like it's not on the video game developers to keep journalistic outlets alive. That's not going to be a thing that they do. That's going to be up to the hedge funds that, you know, buy up sites and then strip them for parts and then sell them off in hopes of making a quick buck. They don't have the solution to that problem, unfortunately. But the things that I think that they can do is to continue on doing the things that they're kind of doing right now with the way that they are making these games. We have so many games from like AAA and indie that are featuring all these kinds of different characters, these different actors. There are people that are doing the work to make sure that their games are as inclusive, both behind the scenes and, you know, on the game itself. And then that trend has just been continuing on and on and on. And we're seeing this increase of these more diverse games from these diverse narratives and these diverse people. And as long as the industry keeps doing that, that's great. That's really all we need. And what the one thing I will say is that it would help for these big publishers to just maybe one time go like, we don't really rock with you guys. You don't
Yeah.
speak for us.
Yeah.
We have done the things that, you know, we wanted to do, and this is what it looks like. And if you don't like that, that's fine. There has to be, we have to divorce ourselves from like offending people who might purchase our games, right? Like they don't really say that because they don't want to really step in the shit, and I don't really blame them for it. But at the same time, we have to get comfortable with telling people, if you don't like this shit, then it's not for you and you can go elsewhere, and that not everything has to be for you, and that
Mhm.
this is a game that we decided that we wanted to make, and we're very happy with it, and we're happy with all the choices that we made. And if that's something that bothers you, you go elsewhere, right?
It's so
Letting
funny
them
that you
people
said
know
that.
that they're not welcome
Yep.
is probably the
100%.
best thing we can do.
It's so funny that you say that because the gaming industry had no issue doing that for a very long time when Black people were ostracized. For a very long time, they were very much like, "This is what we make," and, you know, you deal with it. And now that there are more games that are including more Black and brown and marginalized people, it's like they feel like they need to apologize for including us, and it's a very different tactic that we see. We don't see that kind of steadfast, this is our creative vision when it comes to. I think it would be a great way of handling it, for games in the future that do come out that do have marginalized groups, because we still have the games that are very monolithic, and, you know, a lot of gamers play them. They're great games as well, but I think both of them can exist in ways, that can have that public statement where you can say, you know, this is our creative vision and we were going to stick by it. I think threading the needle, especially to bigoted audiences, I think that's the difference. To audiences that explicitly express bigoted views is the problem, when it comes to that. Kim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think that, you know, we talk about representation as innovation a lot at Sweet Baby, where representation is not just, you know, nobody wants check boxes and tokenism, right? Which is what always gets thrown at. It's like, oh, you just want this, you just want that. But no, to me, bringing in, you know, new perspectives, bringing in new ideas, bringing in different cultures than we've seen before, different experiences, it creates something new. And I don't think, you know, outside of that very small audience, I think largely people do want something new. People want to have new stories. People want to go on new kinds of adventures. People want to be able to experience new kinds of game mechanics based on X, Y, or Z. And so for me, it's like, if representation is innovation, innovation is change. At the end of the day, that's all that they're really, really afraid of, right? They're afraid of anything that doesn't look like they remember. And, you know, we all have the Super Nintendo games or whatever, the old the old games that we cling to nostalgically, but everything evolves, everything changes. And I think as long as, as folks remember, we're making products, but we're also making art, and we're going to stand by it. I think that's exactly the way to go.
Yeah, completely agree. We have to wrap up. This has been a very amazing conversation. It's been great to have this discussion, and it's been great to hear your experiences and hear how you're still, you know, doing the good work in your respective, companies and in your respective lanes. Where can everyone find you on social medias? How can people support you, so that, you know, you can continue doing your work? Let's start with Ash.
Yeah, you can find my writings at The Verge, where I write about entertainment and specifically video games. And you can, if you want to support me personally, you can follow me on my Twitter, where I will yell at everyone to play Capcom's Kunitsugami, and that's at Astra. That's ADASHTRA.
Amazing. Kim?
I am mostly off social media. I do nothing but Elden Ring these days, just hundreds and hundreds of hours. But I can be found at sweetbabyinc.com if you want to ask any questions or get in touch with us for collaboration. I'm also on, we're on LinkedIn as well, and so am I. And that is about it. I'm no longer on Twitter. I decided.
God
You
bless.
know what?
Would that we were all so lucky. Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant move I've locked my account. It's never getting reopened again. All I do is tweet about House of the Dragon anyway, so it's perfectly fine.
Perfect.
But thank you both for having this amazing and very candid conversation. Again, thank you for allowing our platform to host it. To everyone at home, stay tuned because we're going to wrap up the summit. We've got a couple of messages for you. And thank you again, Kim and Ashley. See you in the next bit.
Thank you for having me.